share the streaming link.
It's streaming on YouTube right now. Yeah, one sec. I'll just give you the link.
Okay, so we're ready to go live on YouTube.
All right.
Yeah, I've posted the link in the chat as well. There's a 20-second delay between stream and the meeting, so it'll be right about syncing up now.
All right. So I think we're ready to start. So a very good afternoon, all the respected panelists, my teammates present, and the participants of the Youth Innovation Challenge 2020. I, Abhishek Sudke, founder and president of Project Statecraft, I'm truly proud to welcome you all to the flagship event of Youth Innovation Challenge 2020. Young people form the social fabric and the sustainability foundation of our society, a prosperous society and a peaceful society. And it is contingent on the successes and failures of the young people present in it. Project Statecraft is the very realization of this responsibility. As a youth-led policy think tank and a youth organization, we aim to contribute our bit by empowering young people, by edifying the masses and enacting a change. Youth Innovation Challenge is our step towards achieving these objectives, and I'm humbled by the response and support that we received from those 1,300 fellow young people who contributed to this very effort. YC 2020 received an immense response from more than 25 states and 4 union territories in India, along with numerous people who pitched in from over 16 different countries across the globe. The response makes me believe that a sustainable and prosperous future is extremely possible in today's age. As part of the Youth Innovation Challenge 2020, we organized 2 different events before the panel discussion, the first one being the opinion poll. And the results of the opinion poll were a true eye-opener for all of us. From the opinion poll, we realized that 47.9% of young people believe that lack of quality education is the most pressing issue that they want to solve. Or in the words of my team, that is the problem that they want to fix. Now, in addition to this, 15.6% of young people wanted to solve the problem of widespread unemployment, while 11% believed that gender inequality is a problem that plagues our society. I believe that all 3 of these problems go hand in hand, and solving them through holistic approaches and with involvement of young people would go a long way in ensuring a sustainable society. But how do we solve these problems? How do we prevent so many young people from getting trapped in the vicious cycle of unemployment, low quality of life, and so many other problems that arise from these? Our poll also suggested that 70% of the people believe that social entrepreneurship and volunteering is the way of solving these problems. Empowerment of young people, followed by their inclusion in the decision-making process for social development and policy making, is a significant aspect that needs to be discussed, and a way to ensure a robust mechanism for the same must be found in today's age. Our 130 solutions that we received as part of the Youth Innovation Challenge largely focused on this very inclusion and made us realize that this panel discussion would be a significant step in realizing these problems, and that young people and the young people face in getting involved in social development, and will show us a way ahead to achieve the same. Well, we have come a long way from what our society was in the decades preceding our own. And the credit for bringing us this far goes to the hard work and effort that the previous generation put in. However, it is our mantle to carry now. And the previous generation is ready to show us the path forward, which is very clear from this very panel that is present here. With this, I would like to welcome all the panelists present here, and would like to introduce the moderator of today's panel discussion, the Executive Vice President and co-founder of Project Statecraft, Shivang Singh Chauhan. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Shivang, and I have the pleasure of moderating this amazing panel discussion with such eminent personalities, and we'll move into the introduction of said personalities in a second. But first, when we talk about Project Statecraft and the Youth Innovation Challenge as a whole, We think Project Statecraft has endeavored ever since its conception to provide for and work towards an environment to aid the youth in being the very best version of themselves, right? The Youth Innovation Challenge was birthed in the pursuit of the self-same vision, the culmination of the event on a day meant to look upon and celebrate the youth in the form of the International Youth Day, surrounded by such eminent panelists, valued participants, and various partner organizations, speaks greatly as to the success of YIC 2020. Let's move on to the panelists. We've got a wide variety, right? Now, first, we have Mr. Varun Kashyap, who is the co-founder and chief evangelist at LetsEndorse. LetsEndorse is a community platform that engages the NGOs, social innovators, businesses, companies, governments, and all the people to create an ecosystem that drives social change. Next, we have Ambassador Niraj Srivastava. Niraj Srivastava is a former Indian diplomat who was the ambassador of India to several countries, including Denmark and Uganda. He joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1983. During his career spanning almost 33 years, Sir has served in Indian missions in several countries around the world, including Syria, the United States, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Canada, Uganda, and Denmark. He has also held several positions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in New Delhi and currently works as an independent international affairs consultant. Next, we have Dhuwarakha's Sriram, Chief of the Adolescent Development and Participation, ADAP, Generation Unlimited, UNICEF. An international developmental expert, she brings with her nearly 17 years of strategic planning and programming experience with the UNICEF and the UNHCR in areas of adolescent youth empowerment, skills, employment, gender, and child protection. Next, we have Professor Chirantan Chatterjee. Chirantan Chatterjee, sir, is an associate professor in economics and strategy at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, where he also holds the ICICI Bank Chair in Strategic Management. In 2019, he was awarded the IIM Ahmedabad VVEF Outstanding Researcher Award. Sir is also a 2018-19 recipient of the prestigious W. Glenn Campbell and Rita Ricardo Campbell National Fellowship Awards at the Hoover Institution, Stanford University. He was also additionally appointed in 2019 as the Edward Teller National Fellow at the Hoover Institution, Stanford University. He's currently a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution for the period of 2019 to 2021. Last but not least, we have Ms. Devangana Mishra, Director, Fellowship Recruitment, Marketing Partnerships, Teach for India. Teach for India is a non-profit organization that is part of the Teach for All network. The fellowship recruits college graduates and working professionals to serve as full-time teachers in low-income schools for 2 years. Lastly, we have Aman Johri. He is the CEO of Jatayu Unmanned Systems and aerospace engineer and a Purdue and SRM alumnus. Aman is an entrepreneur, motivational speaker, drone pilot, rifle shooter, educational consultant, and defense policy analyst. He's also the youngest representative of India at the United Nations Youth General Assembly 2018 and the Youth Diplomats Forum in 2017. As a whole, we believe he embodies the spirit of the Youth Innovation Challenge 2020. Before we move on, we think the starting for all of the panelists present here is a set of opening statements to tell us a little bit more about themselves, their work, as well as their understanding the standing of youth involvement in social development and policy making. Let's start with Mr. Abhishek Gupta. Apologies. Let's start with Ms. Dhuwarakha Sriram.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and it's such a pleasure to be with everyone of you and to also learn from all of you as well. Sorry, my internet connection seems unstable, so please let me know if there's any connection issue happening. I have been working currently in India for the last 5 years, looking at the whole adolescent development and participation. And it has been a pleasure for us to move from that transition to also look at youth development and participation as well. So I want to give you a little bit of a quick overview of what is GenU, which is called Yuva in India. It's a term that was coined by young people themselves. This started with all the youth-led consultations and dialogue. The vision for us is to ensure that we reach 100 million young people with aspirational socio-economic opportunities, including job matching, entrepreneurship, apprenticeship, and internship. The second is to facilitate 200 million young people with relevant skills for productive life and future of work. This includes career guidance, 21st century skills, flexible learning programs. And third, and the more critical one, is to partner with 300 million young people as change makers and support their leadership journeys, including innovations and engagement with them in the process. This is required because one is to connect the pillars. There are lots of initiatives that are around education, around skilling, around employment or youth engagement. We believe that this initiative connects all this as a continuum. Second is to bring all the different multiple stakeholders onto one platform as private sector, civil society organizations, but more critically, the young people themselves. The third is to really match the supply and the demand around education, skilling and employment and youth engagement. So really ensuring that, it speaks to each other and it's not that we are training people without really looking at what is the demand for it and what are the aspirations of young people themselves. And lastly, and more critically again, is to really listen to young people's voices around these processes, engage them in the governance and the accountability mechanisms as well. So we are really looking at you are being owned by the young people themselves, including the identity and the brand, and really being part of the whole different design and the stage and the design conceptualization of it as well. I don't know whether you want me to go into the details of it at this point in time or a bit later.
The details, if you feel are relevant with respect to the theme, you could please expand.
Sure. Okay. So I think what I was quite fascinated when I looked at some of the solutions and the ideas is really about solving the minimal inclusion of youth in the decision-making policy. Now, when we look at the work both in India and global, there are different ways of how adolescent and youth participation has been looked at. There has been some initiatives that are not really engaging young people themselves, and where majority of the adolescents and young people have little or no opportunity to express their views. We have consultative partnership, which is the next stage, where it's adult initiated and adult led and managed. But it doesn't really involve young people in expressing their views and ideas on what they want to do themselves. The third, and where majority of a lot of our initiatives have been focused, it's about collaborative participation, where it's still adult initiated, but involves the partnership of young people, and it enables them to really challenge both the processes and the outcomes. And where we want to get to eventually is adolescent and youth-led participation, where they themselves decide what are the concerns that affect them, and adults serve as facilitators rather than leaders in the process. And that's where two of the solutions that you have looked at also comes in. And I really am excited to see a little bit around this as well. When we're looking at adolescent and youth-led participation, we really need to look at some basic requirements or guiding principles, I would say. The first, respectful, youth-friendly, and it's relevant to them. It's inclusive. We have to ensure that urban, rural, girls and boys, transgender, those from tribal areas, from the minorities, they're all involved in the process as well. And it's safe and sensitive to risk and looks at the accountability. Now, some of the learnings that we have had when we are looking at adolescent and youth-led participation, especially in the policy process, I think one big shift that needs to happen is to move from a human capital development towards more a transformative mode of engagement. We need to recognize the frustrations and aspirations of the young people, articulate why we want to engage with them and how we are planning to, and they need to be at the center and the decision making of it. We need to not treat young people as economic dividend or problem solvers. We need to see them as equal partners in this change that we want to see. Second, as I mentioned earlier as well, we need to look at context sensitive and differentiated programming. We cannot have one size fits all initiatives for adolescent and youth-led participation. So looking at what are the demographics, the drivers, the settings, especially for a country as large as India. The third one is that we need to look at flexible ways. There cannot be one singular way of youth engagement as well. It's not that you go from A to Z. So really seeing what are those multiple journeys that young people can take, what are those intersections and interlinkages with social and economic opportunities as well. So there is an incentive for their change. And really look at fourth, the main point about having an evidence-centric action and joint accountability with young people. Even if you're looking at youth-led participation, the accountability, the participation in governance mechanism is still a bit tricky and limited. So how can we really ensure their participation and accountability in these processes? And we need to really look at working with them in the governance, the partnerships and the operationalization of the initiatives. And that's what we are looking at UA as well. How do we really ensure that it happens? So in UA, we are looking at four main initiatives. One is listening to young people's voices. We have launched a tool called U-Report in India. You can look at it as well. Currently, we are running a survey on the impact of COVID on skilling, employment, and youth engagement and learning. And we want to really analyze what young people are saying and use that for policy advocacy, so there could be changes that can be brought about in terms of the policies and plans that are being implemented on ground, and also take it back to them and say, okay, these is what are the main concerns, how can you solve them? So similar to what YIC is also looking at. Second is to inform them and educate them and inspire them to take action. So providing them with a series of learning tools, information, where they can make the choice about what action they want to take and how they can go about doing it. And we, as partners and stakeholders, are only facilitating that journey and not taking over that whole process. And lastly, is really to amplify those positive changes and how they can be taken to media, to parliamentarians and other influencers. So the positive stories create a ripple effect across the variety of partnerships that we're looking at. So finally, I just want to say that for Yuva in India, we're looking at all these initiatives, but critically linked to the whole participation in policy process. We are looking at establishing a young people's action team. We have called for an application across various walks of life, where we want to form this reference group for the governance mechanisms of Yuva, as well as for all the partnerships that we have with the government, UN agencies, World Bank, private sector, and civil society organizations. We have also recently launched a partnership with the Ministry of Youth Affairs together with other UN agencies, where we want to partner with 10 million young people to become those volunteers and agents of change and really facilitate their journeys as leaders. We have International Youth Day event happening today at 7:30, where we'll be hearing from many of these young champions of how they have inspired action and really connect them with the policy stakeholders as well. And they're from the most marginalized communities, inspiring stories that you should all listen to. I would just want to thank again for the opportunity to share our journey with you, and really looking forward to learning from all of you. And I want to leave with the saying that finally, sooner or later, we are going to be judged. But young people are 25% of the generation, but they're going to be 100% of our future. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for that very comprehensive opening statement. Next, if we could have Professor Chirantan Chatterjee to add to it or give his own opinions regarding the same. So you're muted. If you could just unmute first.
I will start with, I hope everybody can hear me. I will start with one of the selected projects, which is on the buddy system to ensure that there is a right to quality education in the country. I think the cause that is selected is excellent. That is what it should be. We should aiming towards as a society. And I also like the idea of having a buddy system. And at the same time, I do want to point to some caution in the sense that there are several buddy systems that are operating right now in India, because different companies are engaging in CSR activities, especially in the education space, through this buddy system. But the question is, who are these buddies? Is the buddy system working? Is the buddy system working for some people and not for others? These, I'm not so sure evidence-based evaluation has happened. And if evaluation shows us an update that might be required to the buddy system, I don't know of, maybe I'm not exposed to it, but I don't know of research-based evidence on updating of a broader mission towards creating buddies in the economy and in the society at large. And it's super critical because one of the key things that I worry about the youth in India is the question of values and principles. And the reason I mention this is because India is going through, even from the pre-COVID era, I think it's India is going through a very transformative stage as a society and as an economy. And you place India as in the context of its position in the world. These values and principles and ethics are extremely important, because it is the youth of India which will basically sketch out how India will look from now 30 years down the line. And if we forsake values and principles in that transformative process, I think it will be complicated. In the accomplishments, you may actually have short run material accomplishments, but in terms of a legacy that you might leave back for civilization, that could be problematic. Uh, just to translate what I mean by all of that into my exposure to the youth in India. So I generally interact with a lot of students in class, a lot of research assistants, a lot of cousins and nephews who are younger, like 10, 15 years younger than me. I think the one thing that I'm quite amazed, and when I place myself when I was 25 and listen to what they are going through, there are two things that really worry me about their thinking process. One is they seem to be suffering from some despair. Okay, there's no hope. They can't see evangelists who can give them a chart of, oh, India is on the growth path, there is a respect that's happening for India, economy is flagging, our societal leaders and political leaders are showing us. It seems like there's a lot of despair, and I'm not just talking of those who are privileged and can have access to an YouTube streaming link right now, but even beyond those in the villages and towns of India. I feel like there's a need to create like a mission for hope, whether it's in terms of livelihoods or in terms of values or some combination therein. The second thing I would like to stress here is, apart from hope, there is fear. Where the India I grew up in when I was young was a culture where I felt like there was a lot of accommodative questioning. People could question evidence. There was a lot of debates. There are books written by world famous economists like Amartya Sen on the argumentative Indian. Now we live in a social media driven Indian where questioning seems to be completely the scapegoat for trolls, right? And that's really problematic, because privately then I'm listening to feedback from my students, even from an elite place like IIM Ahmedabad, that they are super afraid to talk about things that they seem are not going right. And that's like quite surprising to me, because I didn't feel like India was a paragon for that kind of a philosophy of living. I think if you go back to like 1,000 years to the world of Shankaracharya and others, our monks debated vociferously on new ideas and new thought experiments. And we feel like we are becoming very homogeneous in our thinking process. And that's not the India that we should stand for as a young India going forward. My last point is on the belief in science and evidence, because that's basically what I drive my professional identity comes from as a researcher, etc. So I feel like more and more there is how do I put this? So basically there is a lack in taste for rigorous evidence that I'm witnessing in the scientific and policy ecosystem in this country. And this is a real worry for me. And I hope that when you have a right to quality education, that quality part of the right to education story can actually reinvigorate, number one, hope, number two, the lack of fear, and encourage argumentative debates, and last, curiosity and questioning, such that evidence is arrived at as in terms of what's working and what's not working. And depending on that, one can openly update stances, policy stances, scientific stances, societal stances in terms of choices the country is making. So those are my broad comments right now, and I can get into specifics of my teaching, my research, and broader activities that I do later on, but I'll leave it at that, and I'll listen to others, and there are some eminent panelists here, and take questions from all of you.
Right. Thank you for that, sir. Ma'am, Devangana, if you could just join in and give your views.
Lovely. I'm so glad to piggyback right after Professor Chatterjee, because I was going to talk about the same thing. Um, just to quickly introduce myself. So this is the first time I'm doing anything which is outside of a classroom, outside of a school. I've spent the last 11 years of my life working with inclusive classrooms, helping write curriculums, helping train teachers on how do you understand autism, how do you create inclusive classrooms, how do you make learning a space which is not teacher teaching a student, but a student driving curriculum, a student driving learning. So this is a completely new role. This is a completely new understanding of the big world. I've spent a lot of time on micro tasks and small spaces. But just thinking about what Professor Chatterjee was talking about, I really believe that we need to see a complete overhaul of how education looks and seems, right? I don't know where is the culture of debate. I don't know where is the culture of divergent thinking got lost today. I think the internet, social media has turned us into echo chambers. There's constant vigilance around what we share, what we speak. There's a woke culture that has just arisen. There's a cancel culture, shame culture that has just taken over original ideas, original thoughts. You don't want to seem divergent because of what might happen. So just again talking about the buddy program, talking about curriculum, talking about all of these things, how do we first zoom out and actually think about what is curriculum, right? What are the NGOs thinking? What are the teachers thinking? How do we actually root the NEP for the next 20 years in rethinking what we think about education, right? Like what Professor Chatterjee was saying, how do we go back to a time where we actually sat and we dialogued and we discussed? How do we build values, not out of a value education class, out of a civics book, but out of everything that we do in real life, right? Principles, values, life skills come out of actually doing things rather than sitting and learning. When I worked in classrooms, I thought the best learning for my kids happened when we went out for a walk with our writer's notebook to think about what is writing, what inspires writing, what is sadness, what is it making you feel, right? So I just think, how do we start to rethink a lot of this factory worker attitude that we put into curriculum, into classrooms, and actually take it back to a time where it was evolving, iterative, where it was child driven from an understanding of what I want, what are my struggles, and how do I get curious about solving those, reading for those, reaching out for those, right? How do we make learning fun? Like when I saw the eyes of my students light up, I knew I was onto something. So how do I move from that? How do we train teachers to actually start thinking like that? So I sometimes sit at Teach for India because I'm like, we're trying to get the best people to come in and create this across India, inspire other young people to also start to understand all of these things. But then I sometimes sit at night and I'm like, how are we going to make this possible for a million students? How are we going to make this possible for a country as large as India? How are we going to actually take this nuanced, qualitative, in-depth human approach and scale it? Because it was so fulfilling when I did it with a small group of people, when I did it in a classroom, because I could honestly, within 6 months, I could see miracles happen in that space of a school, but I don't know how to create that miracles at a national level. So the sunshine and the gray to education is, while there's so much that can happen, how do we make that happen? How do we solve for it? So yeah, and I think that's constantly what Teach for India is trying to do. We're trying to think about students and how we can empower them. How can we make them leaders? We've got a student advisory board which actually has Teach for India kids now on the board with Nisa Godrej, with the founder of Central Square Foundation, right? And we're making them thought partners. We're dialoguing with them. Tomorrow we've got a webinar which is fully run and completely the show is belonging to the Teach for India kids. But I still think it's going to take decades before we start to see that at a large scale. But yeah, excited to think about with the new NEP, how does India actually make the most of it? And it just doesn't become something that's good to read and another badge on our jacket, but actually something that creates a change in the lives of our kids. So fingers crossed, and really good to see the work you guys are doing. It's really inspiring. I went through your website and looked through all of that. So just learned a lot. So thank you. Really humbled to be here and just glad to be here. So thank you so much.
We're extremely glad to have you as well. That was a very intriguing set of perspectives we just heard. Aman, if you could just join in and tell us your views.
Right. Thank you so much. Just to give a little background of what I've been involved in for the last 6-7 odd years, is that basically I'm an engineer, right? And India has always been considered as as a pipe that basically shoots out lakhs and lakhs of engineers every year. And what we often tend to see is these engineers later on, most of them don't really stick to their core area of work. They divert to other professions, and they do well. They do excellently well in wherever they go, and that resonates with most of the young India's thinking. I've been on policy panels for the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, in fact, even Ministry of Finance briefly. And in all these things, I'll give you an example of something that I resonate very personally with. It's the drone industry in India, right? And about, I would say 100% of the drone industry of India is run by young people. You'd rarely find people with gray hair sitting and age-old industrialists and experts running these kind of companies. These are young startups. Most of these entrepreneurs. One of my youngest pilots is 16 years old, by the way, and he is extremely good at what he does. He's one of the finest in the world. And the fact is that it's a technology disruptor, but I also believe it's a policy disruptor, because all your standard aviation and aerospace policies in India are thrown out of the window as soon as this technology enters in. This is a technology that does not require airports. You don't need cabin crew. You don't need heavy security to monitor. So how do you regulate it, right? There's a critical difference between regulation and control. And policy is often seen as a yardstick of control and not of regulation in India. Most of your hardcore policies in defense, in nuclear, in space is looked at as a perspective of controlling wrongdoing, of ensuring best practices in business. Now here comes this industry and this technology and these kind of young experts who are so good at what they do that they're forcing policymakers to sit down and rethink everything they've ever understood in about 30-40 years. Some of them are even 60 years of experience, 30 years military, 30 years civil, and suddenly these guys are saying we have nothing to contribute to it because none of what we have done so far is working. So the lesson, at least personally being a part of these policy panels for India, is what I've learned is that we need a sort of an information dissemination from the top down. That is that a lot of these policymakers that have already been making laws and regulations for India need to really unlearn a lot of what they think is the norm and what should be, and should start taking inputs from a lot of these young people, which has been going on so far. The reason the drone industry in India has taken off so well is because you see a lot of these young entrepreneurs who give their inputs about on-field situations, right? So policy is like a rich mixture of the two. Now I'll come to a little bit about defense as well. Defense policymakers it's a very small community. The defense community is hardly about 1,500 people in max. And when you have these kind of meetings going on in Delhi, when you have the Mantralaya stepping in, the Raksha Mantralaya thinks that, we need to start reinventing the wheel. We have the Raksha Niti that came into place just about 4 or 5 days back, which said that, we are going to help India develop. Now, that means that when you talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat or you talk about indigenous manufacturing, a lot of that, when you start now, a lot of that will be done by people who are in their 18s and 19s, 5 or 6 years from now. So, right, so these people are still in school today, which means these people need to be trained in the art of policy making. I call it an art because it's a very subtle thing that policy making, in essence, is that you're trying to impact someone's way of life, which doesn't impact you back directly. Right, which is, it's an amazing power, but it also comes with a lot of responsibility, right? You need to have a basic level empathy of who you're trying to impact. Whether it's the education policy that reaches out a whole nation, that does not mean you just don't have ICSE and CBSE kids here in India. You have a lot of people who go to government schools, people who are into matriculations, people who are into, I would say, a rather unregulated sort of education environment. And even in those cases, when central government tries to, intervene in the way education is being transmitted across India, these young policymakers need to understand that who they're trying to impact, what their life has been, what they have access to, whether they're privileged, and how often can you see these guys turn into economically producing, members of society. Now there's a very specific mixture and ratio of people who eventually young Indians who will produce economic output, and then there are people who are dependent on this economic output, right? And this is the ratio that we need to skew. This is the ratio that we need to change. We need to get more and more young Indians to start producing economic output in this country. Now I don't mean that all young Indians are entrepreneurs or all young Indians are CEOs, but no matter what stage of life they're in, they are aware of the kind of work they're doing and the impact that it has. A small example I can give you is that when we do consultancy work to build airports or build big airstrips and helipads. Now, from the state government point of view, it is them shelving off a land and saying this land is dedicated to building an airport. But for us as policymakers, we need to understand when you're building an airport, you're providing employment, right? And around an airport, because it's the center of employment, you're going to have a lot of establishments, right? And so one of the most typical examples I can give you is Dharavi, which is right next to Mumbai airport, right? And when you have these sensitive settlements, you're going to be feeding a lot of families, right? It's going to drive the economy of the place that it's going to develop. You're going to have more flights, more tourism, and so on and so forth, right? Aviation is a precursor to a lot of growth of a lot of industries. So when we start thinking about these perspectives, you tend to get a better understanding of how it works. And my honest suggestion, it's always been to the Education Ministry and MHRD, previously known as MHRD, has always been that policy making should be something that needs to be touched upon in early years of education. That I mean, I don't mean to say you deep dive into regulations and taxation and stuff like that, but what I mean to say is young Indians and young students need to be aware of what it is, and that it is a very strong future prospect for anyone. You don't expect people to become IAS officers the minute they enter school or college, right? But to get a good understanding and grasp of how the world works through policy, and how a regulation or an act or a rule or a law comes into place and changes society as we move forward. What happens when it goes wrong, which is even more important to understand. When someone violates a rule or violates a law, how do you control it? What goes around it? I think all of these things should be aspects of early education. You shouldn't have an entire subject called policy making, but individually, when you study history, geography, science, maths, chemistry, physics, all these things, you need to have like a hint and a subtle, sort of a strength of these kind of topics while you study these things. So yes, when it comes to development sector, I mean, I've worked extensively with the Skill India Council, where we would try to say that, okay, you earlier in industries, whether it's automotive or specialized skill industries, even in aviation, you needed to have like an undergraduate degree to enter. You needed to have like a high school diploma. Just a high school diploma is not enough, basically. And what we said is, okay, throw this out of the window. We say, if you have a passion for these things, you come to a institution, you do 6 months of diploma study, specialized diploma study in the kind of things you want to enter it, whether it's basic things like soldering or welding, or you want to get into proper manufacturing and skill development, and then you start inducting yourself in the industry. And what we've seen in the last 3 years of this policy coming into place is that a lot of these kids, they only take up 1 or 2 courses in the beginning, right? One of them says, okay, I just want to develop semiconductors. This person enters after 6 months into an industry that is guaranteed employment. This person works for 6 months and realizes there's so much more they can do. And they're often seen coming back to these institutes to do more and more courses. So instead of a 4-year undergraduate degree, which is far more expensive and not accessible for a lot of young Indians today, we've broken them down into specialized skills that make them far more employable than a BTech engineer today. So this is like a prime example of what policy can do and how it can impact. Now, again, I'd love to listen from everyone else and start taking questions as well.
Right. On the subject of policy, like, thank you for that response. But on the subject of policy, we've got a very foremost expert amongst us. Sir, if you could join in.
You're talking about me?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. But my field of work has been foreign policy, not education policy, but I can tell you about some things I've observed in other countries, in the education system of the countries where I've served. So you can see some comparison and whether we can take some elements from their systems.
That would be great as well, sir.
Well, at the outset, let me say that First of all, I think looking at India's demographic picture, it is important. Can you hear me? Yeah. It is important that a sufficient number of jobs are created to absorb the young population of this country. And as things stand, I think with the economy slowing down, these numbers are not there. So there is a problem there. And for that, it is the government of the day which has to do its work. It's not because of anything that the students have done. It's for the government to make sure that the economy grows, the jobs are provided. The second feature I've noticed about the Indian education system is that there is excessive reliance on acquiring high degrees, bachelor's, master's, PhD, but less of skills. So, even with your economy growing at 10%, you can't absorb, hundreds of thousands of PhDs, for example, or people who have masters in certain things. So we need to have, and I think now the government is moving in that direction. With this new education policy, there are indications that the government has realized that it is important to provide skills to people, and that not everybody, not every young man or every young woman is equipped or is interested in going for very high education. For example, I've served in the United States, and I've seen the system where a lot of the people, they don't go in for higher education after high school. They go into, they acquire vocational skills, and they go into those areas, and they earn a decent living. Of course, higher education is also much more expensive there. A good quality higher education is extremely expensive there. So if unless if you are very bright, of course, the money is there. All the scholarships are there for you. But if you are an average student, then you need to make a choice about what you want to do. And I think their system provides an early opportunity for acquiring skills. And I think that is something we need to do here also, is we need to discourage everybody from going for higher education based on what they have done during the school education, by which time their inclinations and their aptitudes may become clearer. And we also need to educate them and inform them that there are more options available to them, that not everybody should aspire to a white collar job, and also that respectability should not be just attached to a high degree or a white collar job, but having a skill and doing a job, as a skilled person, should be as respectable as any other job. That is a mindset we need to get rid of. That unless you have a master's degree or a PhD degree, or unless you are in this service or that service, you're not respectable. That is a wrong mindset to have, and I think I think the realization now is dawning on the policymakers of this country that we need to educate our children, because these ideas are formed during formative years, that, what is respectable and what is not. And everything is respectable, actually. I mean, that's what I noticed, living in some of the countries in Europe and the United States, that, I find a bus driver there, the way the bus driver, carries himself or herself, the way he or she does his job, the pride they take in their job, and the dignity with which they carry themselves. It is no less than, any other job. And that is a remarkable thing, that is how it should be, that you should not look down upon somebody just because he doesn't have a high degree or doesn't come out of a branded college or a branded university. So that is something which we need to learn, and we need to teach to our youngsters in school, at the school level. And this, I hope the new education policy, it has elements of this, that you need to find out what your aptitudes are, and you need to go for that. Not necessarily, and here, let me also put quite a lot of blame on Indian parents, that I find that there's a lot of pressure on our children to do this or to do that, and I feel very disappointed when I look at such children. I feel sorry for them. I have 2 children of my own. They're grown up, and I had never put any pressure on any of them to become anything or do anything particular. They do what they wanted to do, both of them, and they're doing entirely different things. So I hope that our Indian parents would also adopt this particular attitude, along with this obsession with white collar jobs. First of all, shed that obsession. And secondly, try and spot, what is your child's aptitude? What is his interest? What is he interested in? And provide him an encouragement and opportunity to do those things. So that is what I would like to, my contribution would, to this discussion would be. I also lived in a country like Saudi Arabia, where I found that, even with all their oil wealth in the world, what they teach, during their school years, you would be surprised. Most of their education during their most formative years of school is religious education. They are just made to, recite the Quran and, study about Islam. With the result that by the time they come out of the school, they're actually fit for nothing. And I'll give you an example that in that country and that economy, huge wealth, they have more than, I served there almost 20 years ago. I don't know. At that time, almost 20% of their workforce was imported from outside. All their medical workers were imported from outside. All their many people working in their factories, many people working in their education system, and of course, as I said, medical system. They were imported from outside because their own children were not educated, they were not equipped with the skills to do this job. And that country was remitting a huge amount of money outside whereas the unemployment level of amongst the youth was very high. So this is Saudi Arabia for you, which is a very wealthy country. I think I'll stop at this point. Probably I've already exceeded the time allotted to me.
That was a different perspective in terms of a variety of different countries and how their education policies differ. If you could just add to that, Mr. Varun.
Certainly. First of all, I would like to thank Abhishek and Shivank for having me here, and it's an honor to have all the be a part of all the other panelists. We have heard some great things. Let me see if I can maybe add to something what has already been said. Because you're always at the risk of going last and perhaps repeating what has already been said. So I think let me try and cover whatever I can from a very, very anecdotal perspective, my own experience. I'm 31 years old right now. I was very, very fortunate to start working in the development sector when I was at the age of 17 because of certain incidences and my professor at college. I was able to realize that, very early on, that this is what I want to do. This is what my passion is, and so the stage was really set for me. And then it was up to me to really take on more and more opportunities and learn and get as much exposure that I can to be able to start full time in the area of social development. So before I go ahead and maybe share some of those things, first of all, so very quickly about LetsEndorse. So we started this company about 5 years ago, and what we are trying to do is to basically build an ecosystem, build a platform that can bring together various stakeholders from the development sector, including the non-profits, including all the social entrepreneurs, innovators from across the world. We are using UN Sustainable Development Goals as the theme, and the idea is to bring NGOs, social innovators, corporates, government, students, as volunteers, even donors, etc., everyone together, so that we can take proven social innovations to the last mile. And again, coming back to from my own experiences, I truly believe that the college time is the best time, to explore so many different things that you have at hand. I think just taking from what I think Devangana also mentioned, not just like debating on the topics that are closer to your heart. But I think college life offers you so many different things, so that for example, if you think about the Model United Nations platform, where students get an opportunity to actually look at what a United Nations summit is all about, and basically learn from that experience, right? You can say as a college or also within a city or even beyond that. So there are numerous opportunities available, NSS platform, Rotaract, Enactus, and so on and so forth. And now, of course, the project Statecraft, offering students to, some challenge statements to be able to ideate and innovate certain solutions. I think college is the best time in my mind, and I think it is because of what I actually did, back in college for 4 years between 2006 and 10, which led me to actually do what I'm actually doing right now. I think one of the perspectives that I thought I could add from the experience that I've had from building a social enterprise and from the development sector is that the average age of people working in the development sector has been typically above 35, 40 in my mind. It's thanks to platforms like Teach for India, like the Gandhi Fellowship, like so many chief minister fellowships that are there these days, that students are getting the right opportunities to work with the chief ministers, work with the bureaucrats, without being a bureaucrat. So you get very close experience. Haryana government has one, Punjab government has one, Chhattisgarh government has one, Maharashtra government has another one. So having those opportunities early age, basically at an early age, when you're 21, 23, 25, whatever, it gives you the right exposure, not just from a social development perspective, but also from a policy making perspective, because you're working with the bureaucrats, you're working with basically within the government machinery. So people on this call today, hearing us live, I think those are excellent platforms for you to be able to get the right exposure. And I think thanks to such platforms, I clearly see that there is a huge shift in the average age of people who are actually starting these organizations in the development sector. Look at Abhishek and Shivak again, right? You started an initiative while perhaps you're still in college. This is amazing, right? This is what we need. So, and again, just to maybe not spend too much time, but see, everyone has 24 hours, right? And we know what are we doing in those 24 hours. We are either on social media, some of us, not all of us, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Either we are on Netflix, Amazon Prime, I don't know, or we are gaming, right? So as students, you have to choose how you want to spend your 24 hours. And if you really want to do something in these areas, so basically I'm not demeaning that you should not see movies, not do gaming, not do. If you are interested, why not go out and build a network? Why not go out, shoot like a short film? Why not go out, learn coding, build your own game? So my point here being that if you are interested in whatever you are interested in, instead of being on the other side, always a listener, try and go build something. Try and do it. Basically volunteer. Even if it is volunteering, even if it is basically, I would say participating in the programs like the Project Statecraft, whatever it is, go and do something. Do not just be witnessing what's happening. Do not just be, for example, following what's happening with Sushant Rajput right now and his case on and basically what's going, I would say trending on Twitter. Just go out and participate. So I think the fact that you students have some, I would say so much of options and like so many opportunities today. Just go out and just try to avail of as many opportunities as you can, and try to identify what you can align with. So you have this KYC in the banking sector, right? Know your customer. Let me change that. Know yourself. First, just a KY. Just know yourself. Know what drives you. What is it that matters to you? What is it that you see yourself doing 5 years, 10 years down the line? Because that would matter. And then try and whether it is social development or policy making or not, or something else. But once you've identified it, go after it, participate as much as you can. And I think that's again coming from, because I was very fortunate to do it. I have been doing this for the last 15 years. I've been participating in any forum that I can, and eventually went on to build what I've built. So that's just coming pure and simple from what I feel is important, and what perhaps I can, if you would want, these are the 2 cents that I can give. Thank you.
A great outlook to end our opening statements. Let's move into a little more interactive segment, right? So we've got a lot of questions pending from the viewers, as like in the Zoom call as well as on YouTube. So some of them might be directed to some specific members of the panel. I'll be naming out the person responsible for the question and the whom the question is directed towards. Please answer that. If any of you feel the need to chime in, please do so. Like, that would be amazing as well. All right. Most recently, the question is directed to Niraj Srivastava, sir. The question is, having experienced different countries and cultures, what have you actually observed in the policy making of these countries? The youth participation in various fields there, and were the youth oriented, inclusive, or were they adult centered, specifically with respect to first world countries? This is from Avelina Datta.
Specifically first world, well, I've served in 3 first world countries: the United States, Denmark, and Canada. I think their system is, it involves the youth in policy making, by and large. They take inputs, they carefully craft their policies. I gave you an example where, for example, in a country like United States, you find that after high school, a lot of skilling is done, and where a small percentage goes in for higher education, for college education. And then I gave you the example of Saudi Arabia, where they produce people who are good for nothing. I think what we need to do in this country is that I think we need to involve the youth more. We have not involved them as much as we should have done. And we should take their ideas on board. And as I said, we should consider, we should not place a premium on certain jobs and, look down upon certain other categories of jobs. That is a mistake that we have been doing in our system, which we have been making. It was even worse when I was a student, which was many, many years ago. But I hope that now, I think that the government is involving the young people more in policy making. I can stand to be corrected if I am wrong. I mean, please correct me. But countries like, for example, Nordic countries, Denmark, they have almost perfected the art. I mean, the perfection of this art what I saw in Denmark, not in United States or Canada. Denmark, those Nordic countries have built a system where it is a more or less a flat society, rather than ours is like a pyramid, and even the United States has become an extremely unequal society today. Today, the United States is not a model to be followed. The model is the Nordic countries. What they do is that they have high rates of personal taxation, approaching 50%, but they have a social system which takes care of you from cradle to grave. And their university education is free to any level. In fact, actually, if you are accepted into a master's program or a PhD program, they actually pay you. Pay you well to lead a decent life. So this is my experience that, and then again, not everybody is able to make it to that grade. There are exams and there are ways of, limiting the numbers. But those who can't make it to the universities, there are so many skills that they're providing, and there are so many facilities for startups. I mean, Denmark, with a population of less than 6 million, if you look at the number of patents that it files every year, is enormous. And a lot of people in this country don't know, for example, that Larsen and Toubro was actually started by 2 Danish engineers. Today it is an Indian-owned and a totally Indian-run company. But it was started in the 1930s by 2 young Danish engineers in this country, and who became, the main person, Larsen. He became an Indian. I mean, he spent the rest of his life here. He died here. He was awarded the Padma Bhushan by the Indian government. There was a postage stamp on his thing. What I'm trying to say is that I think we need to take good elements from the various systems, because our system, our society is a complex society. It is a large society. We have limited resources. So whatever resources we have, we need to use intelligently. So far, I think we have not used them very intelligently. What we have used them for is producing useless PhDs and useless bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, And, first, on the one hand, it is a waste of taxpayers' money. And on the other hand, it causes a huge amount of frustration amongst those people who get those degrees, but really they are not equipped to do any job properly.
I think at this point, there's one question which I've been intrigued about. So when we speak about youth inclusion in policy making, what would be what is your opinion? So this question is addressed to the entire panel, and everybody can answer this question. At what levels of government can we see youth inclusion at this particular point in time, be it with respect to policy making or be it with respect to governance? I think this is a question that needs to be answered in the Indian context at this particular juncture in time.
I think I can come in here. From the work that I've been in India for the last 5 years, I have seen some fantastic work of how youth voices are being heard and being led in many different administrative levels as well. So if you take the local governance mechanisms itself in the Panchayat, Raj systems, you have some very good models how young people have been participating in it. For example, in Kerala, where they're being, heard, they're being the ones who are leading the planning processes itself, whether it's the GPDP or in terms of implementation of it and working along with the local governance mechanism. How we can have a bottom-up mechanism is something that we need to look at. One of the ideas that came forward is about the youth leadership centers. Rather than only looking at it in the urban setting, can we really look at it at a district and a sub-district level? So we really can see that across the country is happening. Um, and not to also kind of direct how things should happen as well. Again, I'm saying that we need to be looking at hyper-local solutions and models and how this has worked. This has also worked in some other countries as well. If you look at Brazil, they have some interesting models of how young people have led the governance mechanisms in urban wards. Philippines has another interesting model as well. So these are different ways of how young people can be involved. We are also working with the district administrations across the hundreds of districts where young people are part of the district administration planning processes and how it can really build on a bottom-up approach then coming into state level and national level. Of course, it's a huge country. There's the largest number of young people in the world are in India. So really taking it across, ensuring the intersections of vulnerability, because what also tends to happen is that the ones who already have those exposure and opportunities are the ones who are still speaking up. We need to really ensure the voices of those that are not being heard are also being amplified. So really, as I was saying before as well, looking at the most marginalized populations, so from the minority groups, the ones with special needs, girls from tribal areas, these are voices that we need to hear. And how can we jointly develop a system from the local governance level upwards to work around it? So this is something that we need to look at for the policies. Just to say that today, as I was saying, for the International Youth Day, the Ministry of Youth Affairs has, for the first time, also looked at ensuring the voices of young people are being heard in the National Youth Policy. And they will be announcing a launch of a youth reference committee as well to ensure the implementation and the monitoring of the youth policy as we move forward. So these are different ways that we can really look at how young people can be involved in the accountability and the governance mechanism.
Right, ma'am. Thank you for that answer. On a slightly different note, it's related to education and it's primarily directed towards Devangana, but I'd like anybody else to join in as well, specifically Professor, if you could, because I think it relates to your field as well. The question is, how important do you think the inclusion of mental health in the school and college curriculum is, and how can you do it?
That's a really good
As in a
question.
positive change, should say.
That's a really good question. So here are my thoughts, right? I think why inclusion has even become a topic of conversation is because we don't look at education holistically. When we think about education, we think about it for the very neurotypical 12 kids in a classroom who must fit into a mold. So instead of fitting education to the diversity of the population, what we try to do is we're like, who are our most average people? Let's try to fit curriculum, fit education, fit teaching, everything to these people and call that curriculum, call that education, right? Books are written for them, textbooks, boards, CBSE, ICSE, all of these boards are made for a very neurotypical group of people. Why? Firstly, why even mental health is hard to understand, autism, people, different places where they fall on the spectrum of different kinds of brain wiring fall, is because of how we have structured our society, where only people who come with a quote unquote normal tag are the ones that are looked at and dealt with in any way, right? So I think step one needs to be, how do we educate ourselves as a society, as a culture, about what is mental health, what is the human brain, why people do what they do, right? How are different brains wired? How do we start to first understand that? And once we can start to understand that as educators, as scientists, as a society, take the stigma and shame away from it. Anyone who falls out of the little box of what is normal is suddenly shamed, is suddenly seen as somebody who's falling outside. So I don't think we can look at inclusion in isolation. I think we first need to get out of our box and understand, why is this even a problem? Why is inclusion even a topic of conversation? Once we've understood that, once we've understood how different brains are wired, what are the different sensitivities, what are the different styles of learning, what are the different tangents we can go on, starting that point, I think we can change a lot about society. We can change a lot about things, right? I just feel like and it's just not the spectrum of autism or learning disabilities or ADHD or anxiety or depression, right? Like, I mean, I just feel like the more we push people to grow, the more their mental diversity starts to emerge. So somebody who's just fit inside a box, they won't grow that much, right? But when you actually get someone really excited to do something, Michael Phelps, or some of the best footballers, or anyone like that, when they're pushed in their limits, I think your brain grows, neuroplasticity happens, which means your brain is growing, which means your needs will become more. And as a society, as educators, how do we start to cater to that? I think is important. I don't know if I answered the question, but yeah, like, I just think we need to understand human potential and what does that do to the brain. And then how do we start to create a system around that, rather than caging people in little boxes and being like, this is your limit, this is as much as you can learn, because this is all that we can cater for. So we just need to rethink, how do we think about what are the needs of human beings and meet those needs, and remove stigma, shame. I mean, I just tweeted someone the other day that, why do we even call it a mental disorder? It is not a disorder, right? Like, how do we start to reframe our language around that? Because the moment something is a disorder, people are going to start to shame it and stigmatize it. How do we start to rethink what we call these things? Yeah, just some evolving thoughts. I mean, like, just someone mentioned Sushant Singh Rajput right now, and I've been really curious about that case, because I'm like, that was a very intelligent man. And again, the same thought, Varun, like, if we understood as a society what is depression, how does it turn, what can it manifest into, like all of these things, I just think how we are looking at these different cases would change a lot. I just don't think I mean, I've studied this for 10 years and I still don't think I understand the gamut of human potential in the human brain. So yeah, I don't think my answer does justice to what it can be possible.
Right. So if you could just add to that.
Yeah, I would very strongly suggest that mental health should be accorded a very high degree of priority. It should be taught in schools. It should be taught that it is one aspect of health as a whole. Just as you have physical health, you have mental health. And just as you have physical illnesses, you have mental illnesses. That is the thing where we need to go. That we need to make clear to right at a young stage, that just as you have cough and cold and you have fever or you have some illness or whatever, just like that, you have mental illnesses also. It's not something, it does not prove or disprove anything like that. And so please, we need to get social stigma completely out of this. And secondly, when I see the youth, when I see the youngsters of today and I see the pressures on them, you know, and then when I read these stories in newspapers, you know, I am very, very pained. And I feel very sorry for them because, you know, I think it is a systemic failure. It is not the failure of an individual. It is the failure of the society. The cost has been paid by the individual who has lost his life or whatever. But the culprit is the society. And we need to teach this right from the school stage, that these are two sides of the same coin: physical health, mental health, that both of that, you know, makes a whole individual. That's how it should be. Yeah.
Right.
Can I
just one more thing. If you look at the number of psychiatrists we have in this country per million population, or you know, you'd be shocked. We need to produce more psychiatrists. There is an epidemic of mental illness among all age groups. I'm not singling out any particular age group. And there's an epidemic, and we just simply don't have the doctors. So we need to do that. That's an important thing.
Can I take that, Shivank?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I'll share a screenshot, okay? Can you all see this picture and identify who this gentleman is? So this guy is basically Udayan Pandit, one of the main protagonists of the Satyajit Ray movie Hirok Rajar Deshe, in the land of the Diamond King, okay? And this goes back to what Devangana was saying earlier about bringing back fun to living. I think children of India are losing the fun of living, all right? And we had it, luckily, and perhaps because of privilege and what Dhuwarakha said also, this goes back to the question of involving the youth. 200, close to 200 million migrants recently were given 4 hours to relocate back from the cities to the villages, and their children are suffering. Have I seen any single voice of youth speaking up on this issue till thus far? That's my starting point of how you can involve youth on policy issues. Second point that I want to mention is the critical role of teacher is completely disappearing. Our teachers are now digital channels, social media, Netflix, Dream 11, all of that stuff. The role of teacher as a friend, as a buddy, as a mentor was so influential in my own life. I had a gentleman in my English classes when I was in this 8th to 11th period, who kept pushing us, asking us like, whatever you are saying may not be right. Let me give you some other instance. Kept pushing us, and we kept pushing him. And it was a fantastic debative, argumentative period of my life. Later on, I also got the counterfactual of folks who didn't push me, and as a result, didn't help me go forward. So I think the role of teachers are supremely important. And what we are generating today are folks at large, I won't say for everybody, but at large, teachers at every level of education who are basically um, like gateway custodians of this production shop floor that someone mentioned earlier in the panel. We don't need teachers like this. We need to bring back the dignity of this job. And it's not going to happen through a digital forum where there is an avatar chatting with you about your maths lessons. Wherever you are in the country, it has to be real and it has to have fun. Now, all of that, if done structurally, will get rid of the issue that India doesn't have supply of psychiatrists, or that there's stigma around mental health, etc., etc. We could be a far happier country. And we could be far, I mean, Indians traditionally, if you go out of India, and I have stayed about 7-8 years outside of India, we were known to be a festive, jovial, open, Vasudeva Kutumbakam mindset kind of a civilization. What is happening to this India that we had known, and why are we getting so stressed out? Is something that I want to bring back to this conversation on mental health. This seems to be suddenly like a point of attention for everybody. There's an epidemic, blah blah blah. But there's a far deeper structural reason to this, because the inequality issues are not being solved. We are not involving those 200 million who have to leave the cities and go back, and their children, into the discussions on what is the future of India going forward. Where are the teachers the real teachers who can actually encourage even questions on stuff that they are on. I am open to being debated on questions, points that I'm mentioning in this conversation. I think that all of that needs to be a structural discussion that needs to be raised and solved at a very deeper level for the long run mental health of the nation. And in terms of immediate short run interventions, there is a gamut of things. So my own research is there on how celebrity destigmatization can help solve problems in stickiness of demand, let's say in conversations of rare diseases like Asperger's syndrome, etc. So I have this paper which shows how My Name is Khan was released, and then you saw a sudden discussion at the household level, or maybe my child is on the autism spectrum and I should actually go ahead and consult a psychiatrist. And that kind of a conversation unpacked the frictions and changed the nature of demand in that particular drug context. Another startup that I advise is a TikTok Toe, and there are others, Your Dost and others, which are being adopted at various levels of education to be a buddy, to be a counselor to folks who are suffering, but that alone is not going to solve the story in the long run. These are only short run interventions. In the long run, we need to bring back fun in this country and happiness in this country. And toward doing that, we need to involve the base of the pyramid and have dignity and incentives restored to the teachers of this nation. Teach for India, Devangana is representing today, I think is essentially a noble initiative towards that kind of a vision. And I hope that you guys grow very well, and bring back that dignity for the profession in some sense.
I love that. I'm quickly just going to add one thing which I really resonated with Professor Chatterjee. I just love that you spoke about. If we want to create a society that actually opines and debates and pushes potential and does all of these things, we need the structure, we need the fabric, we need teachers who can actually handle and create a system where such debate and pushing can be managed, right? Like why our country is struggling a mental health crisis is because we haven't created a society that are facilitators of this dialogue, debate, conversation. We've created a society that oppresses this. So on the one hand, we want to push potential, push dialogue, but in the other hand, we're oppressing dialogue, oppressing debate. And how do we find mental health to flourish when there is this and this constantly going on? So thank you for bringing that, because I just think that's such an important point. Thank you.
Thank you all for those answers. I'm pretty sure everybody involved was incredibly motivated by that, specifically in the topic of mental health and how we're going to go forward with that. But now on a slightly different note, this is to Mr. Johri and primarily Mr. Kashyap as well. How can technology or engineering education be modified to include policymaking and social development? This is specifically in relation to your previous answers, right? Specifically with respect to your opening statements regarding the inclusion at a relatively younger age. Ms. Johri, if you could start, and then we'll move on to Mr. Kashyap.
Okay, I can give you two very distinct examples, and what I'm citing now is not something that has happened now. It's been happening for 5-6 years now. I'm going to tell you two examples, first on the central government level and then on the state and regional government levels. On the central government, you have something called Niti Aayog, which is the National Institution for Transforming India. And Niti is the most well-funded, with the most number of resources, and it's a policy think tank directly for the government, right? So most of what Niti does, the government readily accepts and deploys those kind of technologies directly. So like an example I can give you is Niti recently undertook a project. By recently, I mean 3 years. It's been a while. They undertook a project to revitalize the whole process of how medical help reaches villages and rural areas. So by law, a lot of these big hospitals and big medical institutions are required to send their ambulances to these local places, once a week or twice a week as a part of CSR activity, but just to extend their, medical resources to these rural areas and villages and stuff. And in places, what often they used to see is that when you have like a small chemist shop in a village, a village which is serving close to 500-600 people, you wouldn't have basic stuff like crocin. You wouldn't, a pregnant woman would come to an ambulance once in 3 months, and she would tell the doctor, look, I have a bulge on my stomach, I don't know what it is. And then the doctor would say, oh, you are 6 months pregnant, and you had no idea that you were 6 months pregnant, right? And these were some of the revelations that were coming in front of Niti Aayog, and they were really struggling with the idea of how to break through this thing. So what they deployed is artificial intelligence and machine learning in acquisition and control of data. So when they said for one of these projects was the medical project, the other was right after demonetization, when you were pushing a digital economy, and you were saying that everyone from someone who sells you milk at a local dairy should have an ATM machine in his shop. And when they were doing these kind of projects, they said, okay, there's humongous amounts of data that is coming from the country. What do we do with it? So they used artificial intelligence. They were very young engineers. 90% of Niti is young engineers, probably a little probably older than me, 28, 29. So these guys are all, trying to crunch data and put them into real-time algorithms that give you exact extrapolations and predictive technology of how the future can look like, especially when it comes to data. Now, that was an impressive project, and it's been really efficient, and they've used their money wisely, right? This was not a thing of the past. The recent governments have sort of brought this into picture when everything is AI driven and machine learning driven. The next example that I want to give you is something that I've seen personally on field. So we are on field fighting the COVID pandemic, and in this scenario where BMC, Brain Mumbai Municipal Corporation, is again the most well-funded municipality in India, has the maximum manpower. And the effect of having a maximum manpowered municipality is that in a city like Bombay, which has the most COVID cases in India as well, these people get sick more often. You don't have a lot of manpower available on field to do these things. And we've seen a dynamic shift in what the BMC looked like a year back and what the BMC looks today. 95% of BMC is all young engineers and young people working on field. For example, we deployed humanoid robots in the COVID facilities and stuff like that. And this was a policy directive by a very young engineer in BMC who said, why do we need to send doctors to do and nurses to do the basic COVID stuff like delivering food and water to COVID patients? You're putting them on additional risk, right? And with just an IoT solution that costed the BMC just a few lakh rupees, they developed this amazing humanoid technology that does this thing, which was a policy directive and an initiative taken by young engineers, deployed by young engineers. And most of the BMC top had much older people, much older administrative services officials who were just looking idly by, and they said, this is wonderful job. We don't really need to put our feet into this, right? So this is how technology and policy go hand in hand, is that technology brings you a solution and policy shows the direction, right? Policy shows you how well you can deploy this technology on field. This has been happening in defense and space for so long. You have 3 companies in India, which are called the new SpaceX in India, who are developing rockets, to send out low Earth satellites into, near orbits in space. And all this came from policy directives. The government did not wake up one day and say, we need a SpaceX in India. It was these 3 young companies, young startups, who enforced policy to change according to the technology. And that I feel has a real paradigm shift in the way India operates. And it's going to be the future for a long time. I don't mean the COVID pandemic. I just mean that everything in the future, whether it's automotive policy, whether you have the new policy on statehood development, whether it is education, the NAP has just been released, but all of this is very rich AI and data driven. And that also means the more data you throw at it, the better it gets at predicting the future, right? So I think that's the focus of the future engineers of India. The people at least working on top in New Delhi, working to develop policy, is basically based around that.
Thank you, Mr. Kashyap, if you could join in.
Yeah, sure. So I think let me try and answer this in three different ways. The first one is let's talk about the educational aspect, right? So how our education or like basically the college education system is structured, and I think Niraj sir did actually talk about that as well in one of the earlier statements that he made. So the need of the hour is for India to obviously look at so many different other successful education systems, Nordics being one of them. And I think the concept of liberal arts, which is now coming into the India's education system, and I'm a graduate or a postgraduate rather from the Young India Fellowship, and I truly loved that experience. In a year-long program, we actually got to do 26 different courses. In my engineering education, I mean, back at Punjab Engineering College in Chandigarh, which is where I graduated from, we did 5 courses in a basically in a semester. So that was 10 courses a year. When we actually went on to do 26 different courses, right, from literature to philosophy to law to business, and so on and so forth, that really gave us the perspective. And I think your question truly, reflects on that there is no, basically in today's age where there are so many different areas of education which you would need to look at in intersection to each other. So you cannot have a policymaker without having looking at technology. So that's on the educational side of things. And I think just for students, again, I think I see a lot of students running after, even if some colleges have offered, majors and minors, it's not about how much, like how many majors and minors are you writing in your degree. It's really about how much have you really taken in, grasped, and, again, found your mojo, so to say, what really, aligns with you. I think that's from a student's perspective. I also see a lot of students going after internships for the sake of a certificate. Even today, I mean, it used to happen back, even 15 years back, it still happens today. And students run after us. My point is, if you really get into doing that internship, that actual job, if it is technology, that is going to help you, or even if it is policymaking, it is going to help you in a different way in some other work that you, would end up doing, or obviously in the same work as well. From the other perspective of looking at from the government's perspective or the actual role of a policymaker, I think today, data science, without data science, there is no policymaking. And data science is all about data capturing, which is your basics of technology. How do you build those tools which can be used in areas where perhaps you still have 2G, right? So you need to learn about all those things. You need to learn about how do you build apps that work offline. Then you need to learn about what do you do, basically, everything to do with the data analytics and data science. How do you make sense of that data? And I think that's how policies need to be driven. I think no doubt about it that it is definitely at the intersection. The third aspect, let me give some examples from what's happening in the government, what I'm aware of. One is, so government has built this platform which is called Swayam, which offers every district in India, and there are about 650 odd districts, every district in India to have their own website. And government has built a very simple, easy to use tool, without technology. So website, of course, is a very basic technology. You can do WordPress or whatever. But imagine, this is not even 10 years back or perhaps 5 years back, that government had to come up with a platform for districts to even come up with a standardized website. That's just basic technology, right? But other than that, Aman also mentioned about Niti Aayog. So Niti Aayog, and we have someone from UN as well. Dhuwarakha. So UN SDGs and Niti Aayog, are working, together. UN as part of SDGs and basically Niti Aayog are actually working together. And at a state level, there are tools being used, to collect all the baseline surveys and everything that is happening after the implementation of a project in order to map it to the, basically the SDGs. So, if you look at it, policy and technology today are definitely going hand in hand. And there are numerous such examples where, you would see that happen. So I think the students who are in the tech space are also interested in the policy making space. I think they are definitely at the right place. So I don't see policy making even going forward be possible without having knowledge about technology or without being a technologist.
If I just could come in, Shivang, just because Varun talked about the collaboration with Niti Aayog as well. And I think the point about it, starting from a very young age, technology is going to be a part of our life whether we want it or not. Atal Innovations Mission, some of you may know, is a good entry point as well, where we have other big labs for the younger cohort and 14 years, and we have the incubations for the older cohort as well. Atal Innovations Mission is not to use technology for technology's sake, but also see how young people can address some of the social issues as well related to the SDGs. And there are some fantastic solutions that have come up from young people from the age cohort of 10 to 14 years. We're also collaborating with Atal Innovations Mission to see whether there are other solutions around, I think somebody else talked about whether they're addressing the issues of migration that has happened or mental health. So young people have come up with some really innovative solutions around it. And the importance here is that the government, through the policy think tank of Niti Aayog, would be looking at scaling up some of these initiatives as well that will have policy implication. So I think these are some ways of how technology can play a role together with young people as well, and look at social issues and social entrepreneurship that comes out of it.
Right. Thank you for that, ma'am. While there are a lot of questions remaining, we don't have a lot of time remaining. We've already exceeded the time that we expected for this meeting to continue. So we're going to move into a short round of closing statements. Like, so if you could just give us a brief idea on what people can gain from you. Right? So a note of advice, for example. Let's move in the opposite direction. Mr. Kashyap, if you could start with the closing statements. Yeah.
Certainly, thanks for that. I love that, going first. So I think something that I missed on saying while the topic of mental health was going on, and I think it also links back to perhaps everything else that we've discussed and perhaps would be relevant for students. Just find something that you truly love, whether it is people in your life, whether it is the work that you do, whether it is your 10-year goal or 20-year goal, just find that thing. The sooner you find that thing, in my mind, and I'm no mental health expert, but I believe truly that what has helped me is to find that very early on. And, so that is from a work perspective. The other thing that I must say that, because, all of us are living, so remotely now and we hardly meet people, and I'm so glad to see so many faces, just try and, for example, talk to your parents every day. Just do a video call. If you are in hostels, if you're not living with them, just make a call every single day. Just find that person, find that, so you need to have those people in your life. And I think that somehow relates also back to the mental health aspect. I feel that because we are so disintegrated today, because we are so on the social network, but not really network, not really together, not really caring for each other, perhaps. I shouldn't say that, but yeah, and I'm not judging anyone. It's just that, so having that one person or, group of people whom you can always fall back upon and you're talking to, and, you really feel that sense of love, that matters. And I think, again, from a work perspective, again, and I wanted to say this earlier, so I'm getting that chance. So, from the movie 3 Idiots, right? So, and I think Aman mentioned that a lot of us are engineers. I mean, we are a country of engineers and move on to do something else, right? So that's exactly what they show in 3 Idiots, right? So you have done engineering, but then you go on to do photography and you're able to convince your parents. I think, again, that's what it is about, right? So you have those people who love you and whom you love, and you find something that truly resonates with you, and basically you are actually resonating with, and then everything else, would make your lives easier, happier. I'm not trying to oversimplify it. I'm sure what Niraj had mentioned about the lack of psychiatrists, of course, that's the hard truth in India. We don't have psychiatrists, doctors, and we definitely need them. But I think at our own levels, what has helped me, and I would definitely recommend everyone else, is to really find what you truly love, people, and from a work perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for that very, very beautiful message. Srivastava, sir, if you could give your statement.
Well, time is short, so I'll try to be brief. My advice to young people is that do what you love doing, okay? Don't, I can't tell them to rebel against their parents. I cannot give them that advice. But what I can encourage them to do is to try and convince their parents that to let them do what they love doing. That is what will determine their success in life in the future. And at my age, for example, I have seen some children of my own colleagues, for example, a couple of children just rebelling, after being admitted to some of the world's top universities. They just left after 1 year. They said, I'm not interested in this. I'm interested in music. So please let me go to that music school. And they went there, and they're doing very well. So, I have seen more of life than I think all of you. And my advice is that for young people, of course, I will agree with, some of the panelists who have said, you should have good friends. You should have, you should have good family relationships. And that is, of course, the job of the parents also to some extent. But along with that, find your passion and go for that. And don't be hung up on, that this is respectable or not, or that's immaterial. Okay. Like Bill Gates was a dropout. That man doesn't even have a degree. But he went for something which he had passion for that. He wanted to do it. That is the thing. That's my advice to young people.
Thank you for that, sir. Ms. Johri, if you could continue.
Right. Thank you. Again, as Dhuwarakha ma'am rightly mentioned, that India, has maximum number of young people, and in any place, especially in India today, and for the next 10 years, India is going to have a pool of young people with a lot of energy. And if you've studied thermodynamics, you know that so much energy, if not controlled, can become destructive and explosive, right? And which is why we have policy, which is why we have direction, and which is why we have young people going in the right path, and we need to ensure that they do. And when it comes to young people, all I can tell you is that eliminate your leverages. As in society, Indian society in specific in this context, expects you to do some bare minimum things, right? No one will push you to become an engineer and doctor if they did not know that it was a suitable career ahead and it guaranteed a paycheck every month. By that, I don't mean that you earn well or you earn a certain amount. It's basically society tried to tell you to say, listen, be stable on your own 2 feet. Don't go into an explosive pattern. So there are a few minimum things that you need to do before you can, start experimenting with your career. And you should, I mean, in all sense of the term, I say this so often that every Indian should be an entrepreneur. And what I mean to say is that when you try to follow your dreams, your passion, whatever, more often than not, it is something that does not align with the society's thinking of a stereotypical career or something like that. So, I mean, especially people who are doing IT jobs and who are stuck in a 9 to 5 and they want to go out and explore their passion. When I talk to them, when I give motivational talks about these things, I say the same thing, that at the end of the day, right, the person who can hold your neck against the wall is your boss, right? They're your parents, because you haven't achieved the bare minimum. So while you're developing this other career of yours, whether you're going to stand-up comedy or music or photography or so many other careers that are very well lucrative. I mean, gaming, streaming today is one of the most lucrative careers, and our parents would never even imagine that something like this exists. But the fact is that the first paycheck from your other career hits and it's bigger than the paycheck of your traditional career. That's when things start changing. That's when your parents say, okay, you are doing something different, and they start garnering a self of security and respect in what you're doing. So whether it is policy, I push every young student to get into policy making at some point in their life. Do MUNs, do debates, do mock parliaments, see how the world operates, maybe from very afar, because none of those are actual realistic models of the world, how governance really works. But at least it gives you a taste and feel of what you're trying to do. You cannot develop a refugee policy for Bangladesh if you don't understand the history of what they've gone through, of what the people go through. So if you want to make a future out of all that later, develop a sense of empathy, that the kind of you're trying to help are your own people, right? You're one world, we are one community, one race. You really need to start believing in that. Stop, drawing borders and identifying yourselves as this or that, basis on your language or where you're from or where you belong to. It's all about, at least for the young Indians, the next generation of India, you need to start thinking that what we are doing directly impacts someone else's life, and you need to start taking responsibility for it.
I absolutely agree with those words. Devangana, if you could join in for your closings. Yeah.
Amazing. So actually, I don't give advice. I only give advice to myself, which I also don't follow. So what I'm going to share is basically what advice I would want to give to myself today, but also the advice that I would want to give to myself when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, right? Like advice is just something you listen from someone, but you'll never follow it. So I hope it resonates, take what you want to take from it, right? So I think the advice that I would want to give myself at 16 or at 33 would be how do you start to firstly understand that there are 3 things I think that kind of, for me, drive life. Curiosity. So go down rabbit holes, right? Like think about what do you find yourself constantly reading more about, wanting to know more about, and let your curiosity design your life. Because the moment I think we are curious about something, this intrinsic I talk to many young people who are like, I don't know what's my passion. I don't know what I want to do, right? Which is very legitimate. I never knew what I wanted to do. I still don't know what I want to do 10 years from today. But what I keep following is my curiosity. So that's one. And just catch yourself, hey, what am I reading a lot about? What am I wanting to know more about? So that's one. That still keeps me alive. It makes me happy. It makes me want to read it too in the morning. The second thing is get comfortable with being uncomfortable sometimes. I think while we were talking about mental health and all of these things, I think one of our biggest reactions is we want to end discomfort the moment it comes. And sometimes it is sitting through discomfort that leads to good places. So I made so many quick decisions in my life just because the discomfort was too hard to handle. And the third thing, which kind of leads from the second thing, is find people, find systems, find rituals that help you survive that discomfort, right? Like some of you mentioned friends, or calling up your parents, or playing with a pet, or lighting up candles, anything that's healthy that can help you satisfy that time of discomfort is going to actually make that present moment a little more palatable when you're suffering, when you're going through a hard time. So these three things, and lastly, like hope, right? Like I think the one thing that lets life going is hope and imagination. So always hope and imagine that you're going to have the loveliest life. And yeah, don't worry about it. You're going to live a good life. And I know we've spoken a lot and bored you a lot probably on a lovely Wednesday evening, but yeah, good things are going to be in store for you. Don't worry about it. You've got this. So good luck, and thank you for listening to us for whatever much you did.
I'm pretty sure nobody is bored with you speaking, but we'll move on to Chatterjee, sir, if you could give us your remarks closing.
I'll pick on the idea of building a ritual, which Devangana said, and I think Varun mentioned earlier. So when I was young, I think around 12 or 13, I realized that sometimes we have these small little places where even our parents or anybody else cannot just come in and share our thoughts. Okay. And that feeling stayed on, and it grew actually over time. And that was the time when I also got my first hand on Anne Frank's diary. And from that point in time, I started writing my diary. Okay. And there's a very nice line I'm taking back to. It says, she says in her diary, it's difficult in times like these. Ideals, dreams, and cherished hopes rise within us only to be crushed by grim reality. It's a wonder I haven't abandoned all my ideals. They seem so absurd and impractical. Yet I cling to them because I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are truly good at heart. Now, the lesson from this story is that I picked up a ritual. You can pick up yours, but I also went back to some classic. And there are some classics in India as well, going back to the liberal arts kind of a question. We are heading into Independence Day. So I want to just end up with a classic from Rabindranath Tagore, which is this poem called Where the Mind is Without Fear. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches into its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way. Each sentence by Tagore is loaded here. And I want our youth to reflect on these statements and maybe pen down their thoughts in their rituals, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my father, let my country awake. So yeah, thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed this conversation. And I want you guys to take forward values and principles, and maybe usher the country into a new generation that we are heading towards.
Thank you for those eloquent wishes, sir. Last, ma'am, if you could just give us your views and a little bit of advice to join with it.
Let me be a disruptor and say that I'm not going to give any advice, because I've learned very quickly as a parent of twin daughters who are 9 years, who question constantly, who are you to give us advice? Because they have their own thoughts and decisions as well. I think this is going to go back to the child rights principles and say that participation and development is the inherent right of every young person. And I think that's something we need to respect. We as parents, or development experts, or enablers, we play a facilitative role. And I think that's the role that we need to play here, where we may guide them in terms of what are the information that's available, what are those opportunities, ensure that there is a management of aspirations but also frustrations. But I think the young people themselves will have to make those informed decisions of what they want to do and how they want to be doing it. And again, I'm saying that we need to play a facilitative role, and they should learn their own lessons as they go through as well. Of course, learn from elders, but they need to go through their own journey to be who they are. I think this goes back to probably ending up with a poem as well from Khalil Gibran on children. Your children are not your children. You may give them your love, but you're not your thoughts, because they have their own thoughts. And I think this is something that we need to kind of encourage and cultivate from a very young age. I don't say that this is only for young people. It needs to start from a very young age and kind of grow. And I think that's something that you have with all the young participants that we have with us, that you have much better ideas and solutions and suggestions as we grow forward for the future of this country, but also globally. So this is what I would like to end with. So keep innovating, keep thinking, keep coming up with great ideas, but also reach out to all the other players in the ecosystem to see how we can help you facilitate those journeys as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for those. With that, it was an absolute pleasure having all of you on the panel, and I had a great time moderating it as well. Finally, I'd like to hand over this to Abhishek, and he will give a short closing address and follow through with announcing the winners of the Youth Innovation Challenge as well. Off you go.
I would be lying if I did not say that this was the most insightful and the most enjoyed panel discussion that I've ever sat through. I think I'm taking with me, and all the other people who are witnessing this panel discussion are taking with them a lot of beautiful insights on their professions, on their work, as well as on their life and how they're supposed to go ahead with it. I think today's discussion was extremely important in terms of the kind of guidance that young people need today, and has significantly paved a vision for me and for Shivang to take Project Statecraft forward as well. And I would like to thank all the people, all the panelists present here to give us those insights and to guide us in that manner. I would like to thank, especially I would like to thank Chatterjee sir for reminding me of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which was something that my mother always told me about while growing up. And I think that is something that we need moving forward in life, like not be divided by the boundaries, not be divided by our professions or our cultures, but come together as one big family, one world, one family. And I think this is something which is extremely important that we are taking away from this panel discussion. And finally, coming to what most of the people here are waiting for, the results of the Youth Innovation Challenge 2020. So the three winners in no particular order are Neha Jo, who gave the idea of a youth leadership center at urban level and at rural level, which can guide startups, which can guide organizations run by young people into a different light, into a more into a more progressive future. Second is a solution given by Shraddha Gaikwad about the buddy program that was spoken about during the panel discussion, which aimed to ensure that the quality of teaching improved. And I believe this panel discussion has definitely enriched her idea of buddy program and how to take it forward. Finally, the third winner of the Youth Innovation Challenge is Ashish Singh, who gave the idea of setting up youth parliaments at the national and local levels and gave a very intricate process on how to tackle this. Due to the lack of time, I will not be able to cover the specifics of these, though I'm totally in love with these ideas. But shortly, Project Statecraft will be releasing a summarized report of the Youth Innovation Challenge, and we will be covering these ideas to the depth, including the important takeaways from this panel discussion. At the end, I would like to thank all the panelists for joining us, and I hope we have such exchanges of information, of knowledge, and of values in the time to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Shivang and Abhishek. You guys rock. Like, that was really beautifully moderated. Thank you.
Agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you all the panelists. Take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Be safe.
Be safe.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
be safe. Take care.